A warm welcome to People in Earth, a program that advocates for sustainable living within the environment. Today we have Dr. Patrice Talla, who holds the post of a sub-regional coordinator for Southern Africa and Zimbabwe representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. He'll be unpacking the role of business in transforming food systems. According to the United Nations Environment Programme, unsustainable practices in our food systems contribute to the twin climate and nature crises. Some of the thematic areas that Dr. Talla will look at include sustainable agriculture, industrial production, and consumption.
We all remember that last year, the Secretary General of the United Nations decided to start a series of summits. And the first summit was on food system. That was held in 2021 in New York. And that's really brought together all national and international stakeholders working on food system. And Zimbabwe was part of the countries who were really involved and who participated in the discussions. For your information, before that summit was held in New York, there was a year process where FAO and other UN institutions provided support to the government to prepare themselves for the summit. There was a series of meetings held both in Harare, also in the provinces. First, really for the national secretary to understand what we call about food system. And in some of these meetings, the private sector was also involved. We are coming back again because after the meeting in New York, there was a number of resolutions and recommendations that were adopted by the participants, and we are now, as country, requested to implement those recommendations and ready to have the food system transformation in Zimbabwe. In other words, it also refers to the contribution of the business community to the global agenda, as stated in the Sustainable Development Goals. All my predecessors on this podium all highlighted the SDGs. We are very close to SDGs 2030. We have only 8 years left to reach. But are we doing enough to at least reach few of them? And the main ones which really concerns are related to our discussion this morning. SDG 1 on poverty, SDG 2 fight against hunger, but also SDG 17 on partnership. Because what we talk about is partnership. How can we partner really to reach these goals? The food system is a complex web of activities involving different stakeholders, such as production, processing, distribution, and consumption of food. All of these keywords have a significance, a meaning in what we're discussing, and which really involve all of us around the room. So the process of delivering food from farm to fork, so from farm to the table, is characterized by a number of interconnected and complex subsystems. Some of the subsystems include the following. Financing system. Someone has to invest money to stimulate production. It's good to know that this money we have, the banks. As you may all know, one of the key challenges for the farmers, for the agriculture sector, is financing. Usually it's always very difficult to get the banks involved in the financing because the banks always say there is no guarantee that we will recover what we give to the farmers. So I think I'm happy to see the CBS say it's really part of their commitment. We need to work together to ensure that the poor farmers have access to the financing. And not only the poor farmers, but also the business community. Because for the business to get involved in the agriculture sector, they need funding. They need to invest, they need to acquire lands, they need to buy other inputs. We'll come back on this aspect later. The second one is input distribution system. Someone has to make sure that inputs are available to farmers. Because this is also, now we are all talking about the Ukraine-Russia war, which is having a great impact on the agriculture sector and food system and food security in Africa and elsewhere. And we are all talking about fertilizer, talking about seeds. We will soon come to the planting season, October, November. Will the farmers have enough fertilizers and seeds to be able to plant? So how can the business community help in that? Last week, because FAO has established Agriculture Partners Working Group since last year, on which we are chairing, and we are holding meetings every 2 months. And last week, during our meeting, we invited Zimbabwe Seed Associations and also the Zimbabwe Fertilizers Associations. So they were able to present to us what is the situation now in terms of seeds, availability of seeds, availability of fertilizers in Zimbabwe. It's still challenging, but I think there is something we can do if we all work together, if we all partner to provide those input to the farmers. The third one, food production system. Someone has to produce the food. And producing goes from the small-scale farmers to the big entrepreneurs, to the business community around here today. We all need to be part of the production system, because if you are not part of it, we will not have that food on the tables. Food processing. Food has to be processed into the right form. How do we ensure that food processing is really a key priority for the business community in Zimbabwe? I'm sure you all know what we talk about. Food distribution, supply chain. Food has to be delivered from production point to the consumers. For inter-country distribution, trade becomes very crucial. We are all aware, I think we all experience how the supply chain was impacted during the COVID-19. In many countries, we all realized how was it difficult to get the food from the rural communities to the markets on a daily basis. With all the lockdowns, then we could realize how it's important to organize the food distribution, the value chains for food to get in the cities. This is not an exhaustive list, but rather an indicative list of agro-food subsystems. And some of the food systems not highlighted here include land management and governance system. Yes, land issues, you all know, is a very sensitive issue in Zimbabwe, but it's a key factor. We can't do agriculture without land. So how do we ensure that arable lands are at disposal of those who want to invest in agriculture, especially the business community? Standards and certification system, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, SPS. If we need to produce, but to produce well, produce enough, but to produce good food, which cannot impact on our health. As you can note, various actors are involved at different levels of these subsystems, and such actors can be broadly characterized into two sectors, public and private. Public representing the government activities in the agro-food system. We need the government to put in place an enabling environment that really encourage, give the opportunities for the private sector to invest. At the same time, the private sector, which represents activities in the business community. For the purpose of my presentation today, I will focus on specific functions of business, private sector in agro-food systems transformation. Why transforming food systems? Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. It is important to note that food and agriculture are inseparable variables. You can't talk about food without talking about agriculture. And here when we talk about agriculture, it will be big A, because agriculture includes crops, includes livestock, includes fisheries, includes natural resources management. All the resources that contribute to ensure food security. So when we talk about agriculture, it really includes all these subsectors. Therefore, I will refer to agro-food systems instead of just food systems. Agro-food systems are the machinery that delivers basic Socioeconomic impact in any country through nutrition and food security. In many developing countries, including Zimbabwe, agriculture is a key livelihood activities and contributor to economic growth. We cannot talk about economic growth in Africa in any country without talking about agriculture. I know there are other sectors, money, but agriculture is a key economic factor. And that's why it's important that the business community really give a priority and interest to the sector, including the banking system. Food systems are marked by various systemic and structural failures, as well as exogenous factors like climate change induced disasters, drought, floods, and notably the recent COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted the global food supply chains, as I was explaining earlier. Structural failures include exclusion of smallholder farmers and small enterprises from the global food system, while systemic deficiencies include the unavailability of strong institutions to drive food systems. We need to have strong institutions to drive the food system. That is important, and that's what I was talking about, an enabling environment which need to be put in place in order for the business community to invest in the sector. The world has a population of over 2 billion food insecure people, and the majority of which are from the low income category countries. Paradoxically, hunger is one of the biggest global challenges being faced, while tons of edible food produced is lost or wasted every day. According to a recent FAO report, 14% of the world food valued at 400 billion is lost on an annual basis between harvest and retail markets. So we also need, while we are thinking about production, distribution, value chains, we also need to think about food waste and food loss. And this is really part of the value chain, which also means when we are thinking about distribution, how do we really make sure that we don't waste foods? And how do we make sure that what is left can be made available to the poor? Such worrying statistics have triggered global debate and calls to rethink about the configuration and design of agro-food system. There is a consensus to transform agriculture and food system, calling for all actors, including national governments, private sector, and civil society, to play part in the process of transformation. Second, business community in food systems. Excellencies, I think I've done enough emphasizing on why we need to transform agro-food system. It is important to outline how this transformation can be achieved and realized. Agro-food system transformations required a collaborative effort, building purposeful partnerships among key stakeholders. I come back again on partnership. Such key stakeholders include government, private sector, farmers' union, big research bodies, and academia. And I think this diplomatic business networking is a platform for this partnership. I believe you can play a key role, an important role on this partnership in Zimbabwe. That's why I will really encourage this network to work very closely, not only with the diplomatic mission, the NGOs, but to see how you can strengthen relation with the government. Because you cannot do, there's no sustainable partnership we can do in the country without involving the government and public sector. So this should be thinking, maybe, I would say maybe one of the upcoming breakfast meeting could be to think all together how to strengthen the partnership with the government for all sectors. This is just a proposal I'm making. There is general agreement that business community has a role to play in the process of transforming agro-food systems to ensure that everyone is getting enough nutritionally adequate and culturally appropriate food. It's important that we put an emphasis on nutrition because it's important to produce enough, but it's also important to produce diversified food, because what is important not only to eat but also to eat properly to ensure our nutrition. Diversified food, and this is thing that sometimes lacks in many countries. Naturally, businesses are established with a profit motive, minimizing costs and maximizing revenues. In economics, that is called profit maximization behavior. Such a behavior has a special characteristic that is important in fostering resilience and sustainability in agro-food system. As long as there is profit, business will continue to invest in any subcomponent of the food system which are presented earlier. This scenario clearly demonstrates the importance of business community in achieving resilience and sustainability in agro-food system. Private sector has the capacity to stimulate and lead on the following key aspects required in agro-food systems. First one, innovation. We need to innovate, which means we need to provide support to research, because there is no innovation without research. We need to work with the universities, work with the research centers, who are key in innovation in agriculture. And agriculture is one of the key sectors where research is really needed. And provide finances to the research and to use the result of research. Because what we have seen is that sometimes in many African countries, specifically, their research which are made, the results are not always used for the, and the business community needs to be familiar and ready to get involved in the research and use the results of the research. Second, efficiency, productivity, and scaling up climate-smart investment, especially in the sub-region like Southern Africa, where climate change is really having an impact. We need to invest on climate-smart agriculture. It is important to note that the delivery of these positive aspects of the food system through purely market-led models alone might come at a relatively higher cost, excluding the bottom of the pyramid, the poor. I'm saying excluding the bottom of the pyramid, which means the poor, since they have limited ability to pay for goods and services. So how do we ensure that we don't leave behind the poor, the small-scale farmers? It is important to underline the importance of collaborative arrangements between the business and government, development partners, and impact investors to ensure that they co-invest with private sector in non-market distortionary forms. Generally, private sector brings smartness to subsidies. Therefore, governments and development partners should seriously consider private sector partnerships whenever they decide to support agriculture. So, thinking on partnership is very important for the future. To come back on innovation, just to highlight some of the key aspects of innovation scope. All sectors and areas of our agro-food system are concerned by innovation. We should also focus on natural, social, and economic sciences. All types of innovations, technological, including digitalizations. We're talking about digitalization of the banking system. Social, policy, financial, and institutional aspects. Systemic approaches, sustainability science, interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. Agriculture is, when we talk about multidisciplinary, agriculture is really an area where we need to have this multidisciplinary approach. Core areas of innovation and science. Animal production and health. We all talk about agricultural crops in Zimbabwe, but I know that the animal sector is also an important potential for Zimbabwe if we all invest in ensuring that the livestock sector is really has a group that is deserved, and we need to work on ensuring animal health. Food safety and control. As I said, we need to produce well, but to produce also safety food to protect the health of the consumers. Insect pest control, plant breeding and genetics, to refer to research. Soil and water management and crop nutrition. There is no agriculture without soil and water management. These are key factors. How do you work the research for Germany in FAO Science and Innovation Strategy? Because recently FAO adopted a science and innovation strategy to strengthen partnerships with agri-food research organizations, promotion of public investment in research, stimulate co-creation and co-innovation, boost the support of the centers of excellences, as I was saying earlier, global networks and work with reference centers. The global agenda on science and innovation in agri-food system technology and transfer, ensure technology transfers in developing countries. Just some highlights on the FAO work on private sector engagement. FAO seriously appreciates the role of private sector in agri-food system transformation. We recently launched FAO's private sector engagement strategy, which will run until the year 2025. I'll bring to your attention and forward to you that strategy. I think it's a base for any discussions and collaboration that we can have with the private sector. The strategies lay down a clear plan on how we facilitate dialogue between governments and the private sector, developing and encouraging the use of voluntary standards, facilitating private investment in good value chains that will include smallholders and others that have been largely excluded. We have dedicated initiatives that are meant to provide practical means to foster partnership. For instance, FAO has one of its flagship programs, the Hand in Hand initiative, designed to scale up and promote SDGs and land investment in many countries in Zimbabwe. Currently, we have a university dealing with fishes, which was created in South Korea, both by the government of South Korea and FAO. And we are also supported a number of agronomic universities and schools in many countries. So universities and academic play a key role in what we are discussing today. Ambassador of Namibia spoke about water. Yeah, we know the context of Namibia, like many other island countries. There's no agriculture without water and mechanization, specifically for the small scale farmers, because we need to move from the traditional way of doing agriculture, because by moving from the traditional way and providing at least small scale mechanization in agriculture is the only way we can also keep the youth in the rural areas. Because what's the main challenges of many African countries and many African cities is that you have the youth who are leaving the rural areas for the cities. In the cities where we don't have job employment. Why? Because they don't want to practice agriculture like their parents and grandparents have been practicing. So that's why it's important for us to have mechanizations for small-scale farmers, because this is the only way not only to improve their production, but also to keep the youth in the rural areas, and also to support, as you say, to empower the women who are the main actors of agriculture in the rural areas. Food democracy, another ceremony. In fact, the food democracy just means that democracy, we need to ensure that any human being in our country has access to food. In other words, we also call it sometimes food sovereignty. The food sovereignty is a capacity for each country to be able to produce enough food for its own population. And that's also the way to talk about food democracy. We should all have access to food and to good food on a daily basis. Thank you.